Yeah,
There we
we
go.
can't.
Okay, I got it.
There you go.
Okay, can you see my title screen?
Yes, looks good.
Great. All right, thank you, Maria. And as Maria said, I'll be talking about coordinating seed collection across the Southwest for multiple partners. And as many of us here know, this whole thing starts with seed. So here's an overview of what I'll be talking about. I'll basically cover the what, where, how, and who of seed collection, and then share a bit about what the Southwest Seed Partnership has been up to in the past couple years. So first, getting into the where to collect, and this can actually be a pretty complicated question and includes a lot of considerations under active research. But first, it's helpful to know what the ultimate destination of the seed will be. So where are the target areas for restoration? And generally, we work with partners to identify where seed is needed most. Then we further refine areas for seed collection based on seed transfer guidelines, which I'll talk a bit more about. But as a quick overview, a seed zone or seed transfer zone is the geographic area within which plant materials, so seeds and container plants, can be moved around without risk of being poorly adapted to their new location. And then finally, when we get to the more boots on the ground part of all of this, we consider surface management and plan out collections and obtain permits and access to collection sites. So starting with a larger scale example of how we implement that process with the New Mexico Bureau of Land Management, which Melanie was referring to. So in New Mexico, oil and gas development is a big driver of surface disturbance, and that results in need for seed for reclamation. And the sort of hotspots for these activities are in the Permian Basin in southeastern New Mexico around Carlsbad, and the San Juan Basin in northwestern New Mexico around Farmington. So we look at these general areas that are priority for restoration and seed and identify which ecoregions and provisional seed transfer zones overlap with where the seed will eventually be used. And the Omernick level 3 ecoregions are shown in the top center map here, and these capture environmental variability. So things like vegetation and soils are accounted for in these delineations. And then the seed transfer zones shown on the bottom center, which are from Bauer et al. 2014, are based on climate variables like temperature and precipitation indices. And we overlay these two together, the ecoregions and the climate-based seed zones, to capture both ecological and climate patterns that are thought to drive local adaptation, and that helps us restrict seed transfer. So the map on the right shows the overlap zones for the Farmington area in that blue color and the Carlsbad area. And these are the highest priority for seed collection. And we also will make exceptions and collect just using the provisional seed transfer zones or ecoregion guidance independently. And here's another example to show that we aren't always thinking on these larger landscape scales for sourcing seeds for restoration. In this case, we were collecting seed in partnership with the Coronado National Forest in Southeast Arizona for wet meadow restoration. And since this is a sensitive and unique habitat, and the Sky Island mountain ranges of that region are just isolated geographically, our collection area was pretty restricted, and all seeds for this project were collected from wet meadows within about a 3-mile radius of the project site. And getting back into seed transfer zones, I want to share a bit more because it's one of my favorite topics, and it's also a very active area of research and something we're continuously revisiting and discussing internally and with partners. So seed zones come in quite a few different flavors based on the extent of research that's been done on any particular species in specific regions. And the gold standard, when available, are the empirical seed zones. And these are developed through molecular analyses in the case of genetic seed zones or common garden experiments. And these methods look at individual species and provide evidence for local adaptation and interrelationships of populations across the landscape across species distributions, and then they incorporate climate variables that drive adaptation on top of that. And when this snazzy empirical information is lacking, we can use provisional seed transfer zones and ecoregions like we looked at in that New Mexico BLM example to build accessions and match seed to eventual restoration sites. So after we know the general area we're collecting in, we get into target species selection, and some of this can be happening simultaneously. So this involves assessing the focal area and knowing what species are present and how they're distributed within the restoration area and surrounding geographies. We consider partner priorities, so what sort of goals do partners have? Are they trying to improve forage or habitat for particular wildlife species, or trying to reclaim really heavily disturbed sites such as well pads? And then looking at the species options and moving from there to think about how the specific traits of the species meet restoration goals and can inform collection and seed management practices throughout the native plant material cycle. So here's an example of some of the restoration or ecological functions we might consider when selecting target species with partners. And first off, we're really interested in early sterile species that establish in heavily disturbed environments and can help jumpstart ecological processes and facilitate recovery of these sites. And of course, we prioritize pollinators and consider how target species support a wide range of taxa across the growing season. We might also be thinking about long-term soil stabilization and species that can establish robust both below and above ground biomass and slow or prevent wind and water erosion. Climate resiliency is another huge consideration. And as Tom talked about this morning, we want to weigh not only how a species is faring under the current climate conditions, but also what traits does it have that might make it more resilient in our changing climate and able to persist after it's been planted. We might also consider how species support livestock and wildlife. And lastly, rare plant conservation is a huge priority, and it involves special collection practices. And of course, plants don't fit neatly into single categories, and many species, some of which we might refer to as workhorse species, can support multiple functions. And these are just some practical considerations that incorporate the biological and ecological traits of target species and can inform how we handle seed. And we're constantly reviewing literature and compiling this sort of information to better understand the species we work with, as well as learning from experience. So for example, storage and viability is a big one. There's a shrub here in the Southwest called winterfat that we love and has some really important ecological functions, but it doesn't store well. There's research that shows that after about 9 months in storage, its viability just plummets significantly. So knowing this, we don't collect it on a regular basis, but this year we were able to collect it knowing that we had plans to put it into nursery production shortly after that collection. So these are things that are just helpful to know about plants that we're working with. And here's an example of what the result of that whole process looks like. This is just the first few rows of a target species list for the Santa Fe-based New Mexico BLM crew. And this is what we send out with field crews to help guide collections. And once we've identified where and what we're going to collect, it's time to get after it with seed collection. Our collection methods follow Seeds of Success protocols, which include guidelines to prevent both overharvesting of wild populations and to encourage capturing diversity. So to prevent overharvesting, we are sure to collect no more than 20% of available seed at the time of collection. And to capture diversity, crews work to cover large areas and try to cover the extent of the population as much as possible to get that genetic and phenotypic diversity that's represented in the wild population. And other considerations we think about are keeping seeds cool and dry while in the field, which can be a challenge in the Southwest monsoon season. And we have practices to keep seed safe while in the field. And we also think about managing pests that could damage seed before it's cleaned or stored. And for all of this, techniques can vary by species. So data collection and management is another important component of the program. We use Esri apps, including ArcGIS Online, Survey 123, and field maps, and these all operate synergistically. And crews go out in the field with mobile devices and collect data. When they return to the office, they sync their data and we can view it across devices and in the online platform in real time. And last year was our first year of collecting all of our seed data digitally, and it definitely saves time and effort in data entry and QC. And we'll be refining that this year as well. And maybe the most important component in this whole process is the hiring of field crews, which are typically early career conservationists. And this is really an opportunity to engage a diversity of communities and cultivate ecological expertise. It includes training in plant ID, data collection, of course, seed collection, and often cross-training with other crews like monitoring and rare plants. And the Southwest Seed Partnership facilitates training simultaneously for multiple crews on behalf of different partners. And I really believe that in this field, we need all of the bright and passionate minds we can get to conserve and restore native plants and ecosystems, and seed collection is really a great way to start. And a shameless plug, IAE Southwest office is hiring for a seed crew based in Northern Arizona. And if you're interested, visit our website and apply, or feel free to email me directly. And here's an update of our progress in the past couple years. Since the last time we had a stakeholder meeting was in 2019. So in 2020 and 2021, we partnered primarily with the Forest Service, BLM, and Park Service to complete 279 collections from 86 different species. And 2020 was a pretty dismal drought year. So shout out to all the folks on the 2020 crews who worked very hard to find seeding populations and obtain seed that's most likely very drought hardy phenotypes of our target species. And the yellow stars on this map represent focal areas for collections the past couple years. And the black dots are seed collections from the entire length of the partnership starting in 2015. And the red dots are scouting points where we've marked potential seed collection populations for the future. And since the beginning of the partnership, we've made 1,832 collections from 317 species. And looking forward to this year, 2022, this funky constellation of orange stars shows where we'll be collecting. And it includes working in a new ecoregion, the Mojave Desert in the northwest Arizona, and a crew collecting for the Forest Restoration Initiative in the forests of northern and central Arizona. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. And this is a pretty picture from the Mojave, and take any questions.
Great. So I think everybody's pretty familiar with the Q&A now, but first of all, thank you, Ashlee. That was really helpful for taking the deep dive and really explaining seed transfer zones and all of that work. Remember to put your questions in the Q&A down at the bottom. And remember, if you say that you like it with a thumbs up, that those questions will be moved to the top. So looks like our top question right now, Ashlee, is what kind of data do you collect in your Survey 123 forms?
Yeah, great question. So it's the same data form as the Seeds of Success data. So that includes just general information about the species occurrence. So how many plants are present, how many plants were collected from, and also quite a bit of habitat information about where that plant is growing, and of course, the location itself.
Great, thanks. Next question, target species list database with plant traits. Is this available to view?
Yeah, we have it in a few different a few different iterations in Excel spreadsheets with things on like dormancy or storage information. And right now we don't have it shared publicly in any way, but I think that would be something we should move towards, and providing that information that we've compiled, because it's been a lot of work and does help things. So we will consider that.
Yeah, great, thanks. Here's the next question. What is your lead time in completing all of the work before the actual on-the-ground work collection happens?
I'm not sure what the phrase lead time means exactly, but I'm interpreting that, or go ahead if you have a.
I'm interpreting it that it just means the time you need to like prepare, hire crews and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it depends on, so for some partners, we've been working with them year after year, like New Mexico BLM. So we have kind of a process in place that helps speed things along. But if we're starting to work in a new region with new partners, there's a little more learning about the species and the region itself to plan out the collection season. I don't know in terms of hours or time exactly how to answer that, but the thing that takes the most time is hiring crews and advertising jobs and reviewing applications, and that's probably a couple weeks of solid time there, but it varies.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one or two more questions. The next one that's showing up on my screen here is the no more than 20% of available seed worries me. Should there be a minimum level which stops seed collection if the resource has been exploited many times or is quite rare?
So for rare species, that does not apply. There's different practices, if that's what that is getting at, and that's 20% of available seed. And typically, I would say crews aren't really reaching that number. We're often collecting in large populations and trying to sample across the whole area. And there's also guidelines for recollection. So we're not revisiting the same population year after year. So I think it's actually pretty conservative for common species in large populations.
Great. 1 minute, we can slip in this quick one. What are your workhorse species? And then we should probably call it.
Yeah, so that definitely varies by, as you saw from the maps, we work in quite a few different ecoregions, but I can just talk about northern New Mexico since that's where I'm sitting right now. So ones that come to mind are blue grama grass and Spiralis cryptandra, some of our bunch grasses and also some annual species that can be really great early sterile plants. But definitely the perennial bunch grasses are ones we look to as workhorse species.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you very much, Ashlee. And you can fill in those, you can type in those answers on the side if you have a minute. Back to you, Maria.
Thanks, Ashlee. That was the perfect intro to the next talk, and I'm going to be talking about seed production and processing, which is sort of the next big phase of the partnership here. So give me 1 second to get my screen set up.